Every day, 34 people in their 20s and 30s are diagnosed with cancer.
On the 7th of July 2015, I was one of the 34.
On the 28th of August 2008, I was one of the 34.
These are the stories of what happens afterwards.
This is AfterThoughts. Alice May Purkiss.
Toby Peach, it's another episode of Afterthought.
This is a 2-day recording session, isn't it?
Yeah. And we're back for episode 2 of series 5.
That is correct. Congratulations, you passed that test. You know where we are. And we have been having the absolute pleasure of speaking to Jay all the way from Pisa.
Yes.
This afternoon.
Yes.
And it has been so wonderful, hasn't it?
Yes. They were such a joy. And I'm a little bit sad, though, that they didn't speak Italian to me at any point. I feel like I should have asked them to.
To you specifically? Not to us, just to you?
Yes, to me, yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, because I think I'd like to speak Italian.
Okay. Right.
I've never made any effort to learn.
No, but you'd like, yeah. What's the basis of that? Is there any reason?
No.
No. Okay, great. Fab. I'm glad that conversation.
If you could speak any language, what language would you speak?
Oh, well, I probably speak Chinese.
Chinese, really?
Yeah. Just would I? Oh, I'm saying that of going just because I think it feels to me like one of the most challenging ones, and if I go, oh, if you're going to give me the magical power to be like I can speak any, I'm just going to do that.
I can hear the dog in the background.
Can you? Well, I should tell the listeners. So I am dog sitting, and I gave the dog a lovely little treat, a vegetarian little treat. I just thought I'd get that from the pet store just to keep him busy, and he is that in the background. But we're embracing what Chris Helenga told us, right? Which is, just play to your environment. It's all good. The listeners are fine with it. They want to know that Ark is behind me, the dog, going away. Now, I want to talk about Jay, and we're about to hear Jay's stories. Jay had Hodgkins Lymphoma. Always have those connections to people who've had Hodgkins lymphomas. It's the thing that I also had. Also, Jay relapsed after a year, which is something that I nearly to a year as well. So I felt a lot of affinity to these stories. Some of them very different to what, because mine was a few years ago now. But it was great to hear them. So should we pass over to Jay?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just get on with it, because there are some absolute treats in here for the listener.
Just like the dog is having right now.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Afterthoughts. And today we welcome Jay. Hello, Jay.
Hello, Toby. Hi, Alice.
Hello. And Jay, you are dialing in all the way from Italy.
That's right. Yeah, I'm in Pisa at the moment, living that Mediterranean lifestyle.
And so, Jay, remind me and all of this is, what are you doing out in Pisa? What are you doing there?
So I'm doing my year abroad as part of my degree. So one of my degree subjects is Italian, and we have to take a year out essentially to just live with the people and learn the language. At the moment, I'm studying a wide variety of random things like history, Polish, and Arabic. I'd rather not discuss how they're both going. But I'm also teaching English, which is something I've recently taken on, and I am absolutely loving it. And it's definitely it's a nice little moment for me in my language learning journey, because I'm now on the other side, really. So I'm kind of doing a bit of everything. But it's all good.
What an amazing spread of languages to be learning Italian, Polish, and Arabic.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? Do you know, I moved to Pisa from Bologna. So previously I was in Bologna for the first semester, and I was learning Chinese there. So I'm really doing this thing at the moment where I'm pretending that I am Duolingo, the language learning app. because I just want to acquire as many languages as possible. And yeah, that's essentially something that I'm working on in my spare time.
So Jay, we always kick off with quickfire questions. They're not particularly quickfire, but we'll try our best. So it's us that slow it down, because we're like, "Ooh, interesting. Can I ask you more about that?"
Yeah.
But are you ready for the quickfire questions?
I am absolutely ready.
Great. Jay, what pronouns do you use?
I use they, them as my pronouns.
Jay, who do people say you look like?
Oh, goodness me. Well, at the moment, I haven't really got many comparisons, but when I was a lot younger and I didn't have a beard, people did used to say that I looked a little bit, or at least I reminded them a bit of Tom Daley, the diver. Perhaps.
I see it.
Yeah, I'm really glad you both agree, because I've said this before, and well, I mean, it's neither here nor there anyway, but people have been like, oh, actually, yes, I really get it. Or people have been like, oh, you wish, you know. So, yeah, once upon a time, I did look very different, but hopefully I've still got a little bit of that.
I can see it around the eyes.
Yeah.
And the cheekbones.
Okay, well, that makes me feel a lot better. Thank you.
Yeah. What is your most used emoji?
Oh my goodness. At the moment, it's the panda. Yeah, well, the thing is, I did a trip to IKEA really recently. And like, you know, we'd found this IKEA in Pisa, and it's a little bit out there, and we decided we were all going to do a big group trip there, and we just moved into our apartments and we had loads of things to buy, but the only thing I actually bought was a panda plush toy, because I just thought, forget everything else, you know, I can sort out like my bedding at a later date. I'm in a rush, I'm just going to get this panda teddy. So it's become a bit of a meme at the moment, and like, you know, I wear a lot of black and white, and like I always like have this panda when I'm posing and like my Instagram stories, and so yeah, I guess that's my emoji at the moment, the panda emoji. So
I'm living for that. That is amazing. So great.
Jay, what's your biggest pet peeve?
Oh,
what's your gut saying?
Messy people. I'd probably say messy people. My pet peeve is messy people. I've lived in so many apartments, like, you know, in Italy and like at home in the UK, and just, you know, something that really just winds me up is when people just don't like just keep their apartments in such a messy situation, and I can't really cope with it, to be honest. So I luckily my room is all neat and tidy, and that's what keeps me going. But yeah, I'd say mess generally. I like to have things in order.
Love that. Yeah. If you could bake any cake, what cake would you bake?
I would bake the only cake that I know how to make, which is a raspberry and white chocolate cake, which sounds very elaborate, but actually it's really simple. And the reason I know how to make this is because once upon a time, for someone's birthday, I really wanted to make a cake, and I just went on Facebook and I found this video of someone just throwing things in a bowl, and I just thought, I'm gonna go for this. So I'm gonna say that my chosen cake will be a raspberry and white chocolate cake, because it's easy to make, but it's also pretty bougie, and it sounds, you know, a little bit exquisite.
It does sound a little bit exquisite. Like,
delicious.
I really want it as well. That's one of my favourite mixes, raspberry and chocolate. Oh my god. What film has made you laugh the loudest?
I would say Mrs. Doubtfire, without a doubt. This film, we oh my goodness. So there are three of us in I have two siblings, and all three of us just grew up with this film. And actually, like, you know, whenever I go home or if I see my brother, he'll always get me to sort of do impressions of Miss Doubtfire, and we just kind of can quote every scene like off by heart, you know, the fast bit at the beginning, and so I just think it's genius, you know. I just think it's just the best film ever, and it made me absolutely scream when I first watched it, and I was much younger.
It's so good. I so often do your best impression of a hot dog.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
I do it so often.
Oh, so funny.
Big question, very important, and there is a correct answer. Friends or How I Met Your Mother?
Friends. Oh, are you both on either side?
Yes, we are.
There is
And
a divide.
There is a divide, and
Oh, no.
we won't reveal what the score is at the moment, Will. But it is, I'm glad that you've fallen on my side of the friend side.
I'm sad.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Alice. Yeah, I've got some friends.
Right.
Friends is a banger.
And Jay, could you give us kind of a one-line summary of your diagnosis, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was 19, I was diagnosed with advanced Hodgkin lymphoma, and then I relapsed a year afterwards, had a stem cell transplant, and now I'm on the other side.
So this series on Afterthoughts, we thought that before we dive into after, we're just going to touch in on before. So Jay, we just wanted to hear your diagnosis story in a short snippet.
Okay, so I, at the time, was 19 and I was at university. And in typical Jay fashion, I was doing far too many things. I was teaching dance, I was studying, I was working, I wasn't sleeping, and I was just very run down in general. So when I first started to get ill and I started to get a little bit under the weather in September 2016, not that I've memorized that date specifically, I didn't really think too much of it. I started to get some swollen lymph nodes, which is obviously, well, a lot of the time can be a common symptom of lymphoma, Hodgkin lymphoma. And I just went in and I just said, well, this doesn't feel right. And I feel a little bit sort of worn down in general, not very well. My nurse essentially said, well, it might not be anything, just sort of like wait on it. We'll do some blood tests and just come back later and we'll tell you how things are going. And they got back to me quite soon and they said, you've just got low iron for now. That's all we can really see. And I just thought, brilliant. I'll just eat some spinach. This is fine. And I stopped checking my neck and I still continue to do the absolute most, which I won't recommend doing when you have undiagnosed cancer. And a few months later, I started to get new problems. I started to get I got like a really gross sort of yeast infection in my mouth. I started to have night sweats and I was losing like loads of weight and a lot of sort of typical symptoms really of Hodgkin lymphoma. But essentially, things weren't improving. And this time, I decided that actually something was going on. So I carried that and I went in again and I said, it's me again. I still have like these sort of lumps and now I'm just not, I'm just knackered and I don't really know what's going on. Like, is there anything else? And they just said, oh, okay, goodness me. Well, let's refer you to a specialist. So I went in, and they, by this point, I was on the lumps and bumps ward at the clinic that I've been referred to. So this was, I guess the first indication that something was a little bit dodgy, right? And I was at this point, no one knew anything. I was sort of Googling a lot on my own, which is something else I wouldn't recommend doing. But I'd kind of gone in. And my doctor, basically given me a little bit of an examination and told me very politely to wait outside. At which point she then left her room and came and sat with me in the waiting room and just said, so if you've got any assignments that are, going on at the moment, don't worry about them. I'm gonna maybe I'll write a letter to university just so you can have a bit of an extension. Because I just want to rule out something called Hodgkin lymphoma. Well, I think she said lymphoma. She didn't specify at the time. And we just want to rule it out because you're presenting a few sort of symptoms, but we'll just have a look. So I'll book you in for some biopsies. 3 biopsies later, because classic, we didn't get an answer on the first try. We did fine needle aspiration. We did a tiny little incision, and then I had one of them just taken out, and just a little alien. And then they finally gave me the diagnosis when I was in Affleck's shopping for earrings. with my best friend in Manchester, and they rang me, and she said, so I can just confirm it is what we thought. And I was just thinking, this isn't what we thought, we never spoke about this. This is what we were ruling out. And she said, yeah, so I'm going to transfer you to this hospital. It is classical Hodgkin lymphoma. We'll get you in for some scans and we'll start pretty soon. And just thank you to the guy in that shop who gave me a whole roll of toilet roll, because I was a little bit of a mess. I was crying. I don't mean I was like relieving myself. But I mean, both responses would have been acceptable, don't worry. That was really my diagnosis. It was very long because, as I say, I didn't tell anyone really about it. And it was only when things started to get pretty bad. And, by the time I was diagnosed, I was pretty much riddled as well. It was like stage 4 and all of this. And at this point, I kind of told everyone about it. But that was kind of my diagnosis story.
So now that we've got the diagnosis story out the way, we are going to move on to talk about beyond diagnosis, because we tell that diagnosis story so much, but there's so many stories that are beyond that. So Jay, over to you to hear a story about beyond your diagnosis.
Okay, so obviously, because I relapsed, because I ended up having the bugger twice, I kind of have 2 little parts that I want to talk about. Both of them are relatively entertaining. The first one was when I was waiting. Actually, I was awaiting my diagnosis, and as I'd said before, I was kind of dealing with a lot of this on my own, because I was hoping in the back of my mind it wasn't what I'd suspected. But essentially, at one point, I had received a letter through the post in the student house that I was living. And on the letter, it had essentially booked me in for a very specific ward. I mentioned before in the lumps and bumps clinic, I'd kind of done a bit of Googling and convinced myself in the moment that it was cancer. And at this point, I was, quite naturally, I was pretty beside myself, because no one knew about it. I didn't really know how to deal with it. I was only 19, bless. And I was just crying my eyes out. When a child is just having kind of a tantrum, but they're upset as well, and they're not breathing, and like it's very that. And this was my situation at the time. Now, contextually, at the time, I was also living with 11 students in this old Victorian townhouse in Leamington Spa, right? And it was an absolute, it was carnage anyway, notwithstanding the cancer that I was, undiagnosed cancer at the time. This on its own was enough, right, to send me beside myself, because the apartment was always a mess. And I would always be the one in the chat who would be very unpopular and essentially say, listen, what's going on? I haven't even, I need a spoon. I just want to have a spoon to eat my cornflakes with. Can someone please wash up the pots in the sink? And this one time that I was crying, I was in the kitchen with my letter, and my flatmate just walks in and sees me a hot mess, right? She sees me absolutely just in pieces. And she goes, oh no, are you okay? And she looks around and she goes, is it the kitchen? And I just thought, at this point, let's just go with it. Like it was just so funny, because, I was so taken away from that moment by what she'd said, that it was just so hilarious, because she really thought that this reaction, I was literally beside myself, was because the kitchen was a state. So that really tells you all you need to know about my first diagnosis. That was really sort of what was going on. Now, the second time was a little bit different, because when I relapsed, prior to it, I had an inkling that I was essentially waiting for bad news, because I had a lot of the same symptoms the second time around. And quite poetically, it was exactly a year afterwards. But instead of waiting around, we'd done the scans, and we were just waiting for some news, be it bad or good. And we decided, so me and my mum, this was to go to Egypt, because we essentially just wanted to get out in every sense of the word, and essentially just have an absolute screamer, because we didn't know what was going to happen, and we just wanted our last chance, perhaps, of just having a good time without being chained to the rhythm again. And so we found ourselves in Egypt. And it was a great holiday, until one day my nurse rang me on the phone. And she goes, oh, you're right. So what are you up to? Just checking in. And I was like, hi. No, I can't lie. Like, I'm having an absolute scream. I'm in Egypt, I'm just with mum. We're going to go to the pyramids this week. It's very Instagrammable, loving it. And she just goes, oh, okay. Well, listen, have a really good time, really enjoy yourself. When are you back? When are you coming back? Just incidentally, And I said, oh, well, it's like Tuesday. And I said, I'm back on Thursday. And she goes, okay, brilliant. How about you come in on Friday? Just have a little chat. Just have a little bit of a chat. It's been a while, and but don't worry about anything. And I just essentially hung the phone up, and I just thought, well, here we go, season 2. Let's just get on with it. To be honest, and safe to say, the last 2 days of my holiday were just as chaotic as the idea of me being in Egypt with undiagnosed relapsed Hodgkins lymphoma were. Anyway, so I guess that was just. That was my experience, and I guess it's just funny because it was so different to my first experience, but also just as chaotic. So yeah.
Next on Afterthoughts, we are going to look at the invisible impact section, and we think this is an important time for us to bring forward a story that might discuss something we might not see as often. So, Jay, over to you.
Brilliant. Okay, so I think something I'd really like to talk about, and here I will focus on season 2 of my experience, so, with my relapse essentially, is the effect that I think cancer can have on your happiness in the long term, really. So just briefly to dip back into season 1 as a recap, I guess when I was going through it, I was very public with my journey, and I was vlogging it, and I'd be on Instagram pretty much all the time talking about it. I actually had a YouTube series as well where I'd, be like, oh, my first ABVD, shaving my head, all of this. And the first time it happens to you, you just become an inspiration, whether you like it or not. People look to you for advice, or they look to you as a role model. And at least for me, I didn't mind that the first time it happened, because I was it was a novelty for me, to put it simply. And I was just taking on this new role, just letting it run away with me. But then the second time it happened, it just it becomes so humiliating. Because regardless of how much you've been through the first time and how much you big yourself up and you tell yourself sort of positive affirmations and, you live through metaphors, you super glue your life back together for someone to just just drop it on the floor and shatter again. And that was something I think that for the first time with season 2 really did make me think about just my life and my mental health and my happiness, really. By way of coping, to be honest, at the time, I'd actually put together a stand-up comedy piece because I've always been the one to sort of make a joke out of a bad situation. And at the time, I'd basically opened with my comedy set by saying that I like cancer like I like my men, treating me like absolute shit and always coming right back when I've just about got over them. And to be honest, as funny as that is, it really does sum up like the way that this experience had been for me, which is that I'd been messed around once, and then I'd been sort of like told by life, I guess, that things were okay and I'd finally got myself back together. And then I was just plunged again into this, this awful situation, and everything was derailed. And I think the thing I just really want to communicate here is that, the invisible impact is that it really does last, and it doesn't have to. And actually at this point now, I'm definitely getting through it still. But I do find myself every now and then, whenever I'm happy, kind of preempting something disappointing to come around. And bite me in the ass, because that is for so long something that was just my defense mechanism. It was self-preservation. I was preempting chaos. So now in Italy, for example, I'm like, I'm living the life of Riley, and it's great having focaccia and aperitivo and Aperol spritz at 11 in the morning. But what's the cost? And actually, there doesn't need to be a cost. I am totally all right, and I can allow myself to just relax into it. And that is something really that is something that I have carried through with me from my experience. And I'd say I'm luckily on the other side finally, but it has taken a while, and it's definitely been an invisible impact.
obviously cancer happens to the patient, but it affects lots of other people around the patient as well. And this section is an opportunity for us to talk about those too. So Jay, we would love to hear a story from you about those around us.
Absolutely. So my journey was it really did involve everyone. It involved my friends, my family, of course. We're pulled into it, bless them, against their will. And I guess the first sort of thing that I immediately thought when you asked this was that, my brother was so instrumental in my journey. I am so grateful for Joe, his name is, for having been there for me, because he was my donor. So, I have his blood now, I have his immune system. And, you can't really get more involved than that. He sat there for 2 days, I think, in the end. And he was just there, just on this pump, having all of his blood sucked out of him. And I'll never be able to repay him really for that. And I'm so thankful for Joe for doing that for me. It's something that I'm so blessed to have. And so this is, I guess, a shout out for Joe. Now, the second thing I wanted to do was talk about my sister. Now, I'm the middle child, so, which I don't know if that's a surprise or not, basically, but there are 3 of us in our family. There's Joe, there's me, and there's Eleanor, our older sister. Okay. Bless her. So when I was younger, I was a chaotic child. Like, I was very, I was an attention seeker. I was always performing. It was always about me. I was always in the limelight. And my brother and my sister were always so patient with me, basically, with every situation. And bless her, back in 2017, when I was diagnosed, my sister was coming to the end of her dentistry degree. So this is like 5 years of just, of hell, essentially. She's working her ass off, and this is a really huge moment for my sister. This is the one thing, really, after our entire childhoods had been about me, for her to have this opportunity. And then I got diagnosed just before she graduated. And I'll just never forget when she basically just turned to us and she just said, "You couldn't let me have this one thing about me, and you had to make it about you." And I just think that, first of all, sums her up, because she's the funniest person I know. But also, based on that, I wanted to take this as an opportunity to make it about Eleanor, my gorgeous, hardworking, talented, hilarious sister. This is officially about you. And I am sorry for stealing your limelight in 2017 when I went and got cancer.
So it's time now to start thinking about the lost conversations. We know that in the cancer community, we're starting to have some more important conversations, but there are lots that are still falling through the cracks. So this is an opportunity to share a story about one of them. Jay, over to you.
Absolutely. So a lost conversation, I think I would like to begin and talk about here, is one I wish someone had with me when I was going through my experience, essentially. And that is regarding this idea that everything happens for a reason. This is a phrase that I think a lot of people hold on to, or a lot of people are told about when they're going through their own journeys. And for a while, it kept me going, and it was something that I really, tried to understand and live by at the time. I'm going through adversity, but there's a reason for this. It's going to make me stronger, for example. But it's not always like this. And actually, with my second, especially with the second sort of season of my experience, stuff started to get a lot more ugly. For a while, I wasn't really getting anywhere with treatments. And even before my transplant, I was very worried that I wasn't even going to get into remission to begin with. I was going through so many different lines of treatment. And there was a time where, it just came at the right time that this one drug was passed on the NHS. And this is what got me into remission at the time. And so, I was already going through this, but I neglected this. I neglected my experience because at the time I was still alive. And, I had friends at the time who were dying, or people who had been there at the beginning of my journey, season 1, and they sadly hadn't made it because they'd had their own cancers and they weren't there anymore. And so, I ended up feeling a little bit of survivor's guilt and looking back to this idea that everything has a reason, to put pressure on myself and just carry on living this life and just going through it and just, trying to, reminding myself that I was lucky for what had happened. And now on the other side, when I'd had my transplant, I again carried this through. I was like, I've had 2 chances. I've not just had cancer once and I've been let off. I've had it twice. I really need to make the most of this because so many people haven't got this chance. But in doing this, I gave myself far too much to deal with. I went back to uni way too soon. I was like 6 months post-transplant. It hadn't even been a year. And against all of the wishes of my nurses, I just was so determined I was going to do it because I was carrying all of this survivor's guilt. But then, that year was rough, and I went through a lot as well physically, and I got GVHD, which essentially really messed with my body physically, but also mentally, because I then, as a result, ended up with hypothyroidism, which just sent my mental health spiraling for months because it wasn't even diagnosed until it was too late, and I really needed to get on levothyroxine. So, this was a lot that I could have basically done with having time to deal with because I didn't give myself that time. And so I really just wanted to finish off this conversation that I really wish I'd had with myself back then, which is that it's actually okay to set yourself free from the burden of living for everyone else who didn't make it. This could so easily have been you. We are all in this situation. We all have our different journeys, but it's an awful thing to happen to anyone. So it's really important to just think about yourself, and that's not a selfish thing. And I just really wish I'd known that at the time.
And now on Afterthoughts, we're going to talk about some of the things that happen to you when you're a person who's had cancer that might not happen if you're a person who hasn't had cancer. In this section, Not Your Average. So over to you, Jay.
So my immediate thought really with this is that I should probably list things that I'm grateful for that I think I probably wouldn't be as grateful for had I not had this experience. So I guess I'm going to talk about taking a shower, right? This is something that I just will never, ever take for granted again. Just the idea that I can just stand under a shower head and just let the water run over me without any sort of problems, any anxiety or anything like that. Now, the story for this is that when I'd relapsed, I became an inpatient for the first time because previously I'd always been on the day ward, and I just had cannulas in my hand. And no one had told me really what the treatment was going to be, what it was going to consist of, because the priority was just getting me in as soon as possible. And I guess, it's not something I begrudge anyone for. But I think at the time I was just put on this treatment regimen. And I'd read sort of what it involved, but I didn't know how invasive it would be of my personal space. And essentially this one regimen I was on, eSharp, absolute bastard. I was logged on to for a whole week at a time, each time, and I wasn't disconnected from this chemo pump, right? So I, regardless of whether I was sleeping or showering or having a wee, I was always connected to this chemo pump. Now, the thing I could have done with having preparation for was this Hickman line that I had inserted into my chest. And if you don't know how this works, it essentially just is a little tube that goes into your heart. And it just makes it so much easier for nurses to kind of draw blood or give you chemo, right? And I was like, yeah, fine, I'll just deal with it. But it was just such a pain for me because I was never disconnected from this chemo machine. And so I had this thing just hanging out of my chest. In the end, it was in for about 8 months. It was a long time I had it in for. And I was just not prepared for it. And so the thing with the shower is that when I was on eSharp and I had no idea how long I was going to be on for, and my nurses would be like, oh, well, just put a bag over the chemo machine. So I was there with Frederick, which is the name I gave to my chemo machine, who would just beep in the middle of the night like a newborn baby. I basically wrapped it in this bag and tried to sort of like make it watertight. And I was there with this line hanging out of my chest, completely like I was being nuked as well at the time. So my mind was just all over the place. And I'm just carrying this chemo bump and having a shower. And I just remember being so paranoid of like, you know, it pulling out or like getting an infection, which I then ended up doing twice. I'm very good at infections. I ended up having sepsis twice, which meant that I actually had to have it taken out and then put right back in, which was awful, actually, because it meant that when it was inserted the second time, I had scar tissue there. So it was literally like, regardless of how much anesthetic it had, it was just like, just excruciating. And anyway, I finally got this, you know, Frederick, I was finally disconnected from this pump. The line was finally taken out when I was on the other side of my transplant. And I just remember the first shower I took, where I just let this water just run over me, and I just cried because it was like such a mundane experience, but it became so poignant. It became so, you know, so deep for me. You know, I was like doing something that we all do, like from day to day, and I was just so grateful to be able to have a shower. You know, and that's just something I'll never take for granted again. And by extension of that, I always make a point now about sleeping on my front. You know, before I'd kind of always like slept on my side and like, you know, I'd put like my duvet between my legs and like curl up like this. But now I never do that. I just have to, regardless of how tired I am, I always have to sleep right on my front because like I'm just that spiteful. And that's really something I'll take away that I guess is not an average experience. So this is not my average experience.
So it's coming to the last section of Afterthoughts, and I'm really excited to dive into the Don't Laugh section because we've been laughing quite a lot already. But the Don't Laugh section is really important as it's a chance for us to look at the fact that there are lots of heavy stories, but there are also light stories that come with it. And we've heard lots of those moments as well throughout today's episode. So Jake, over to you for the Don't Laugh section.
Okay, so first of all, you're not allowed to laugh. Second of all, I want to talk about an experience of mine that I had actually just before I started treatment. So my experience is all about my trip to the sperm clinic where I went before I started my treatment. And as a result of it, now I have about, I can't even remember, 50,000 frozen kids in a freezer somewhere in Manchester. Now, my experience was it was hilarious from the beginning. First of all, you know, not only have you got to sort of like jizz in a cup, and that on its own just feels bizarre because like it's so what's the word? It's just such a sterile experience. Like it's so formatted and you just have to go in this room and do this. But the reason it was funny for me personally was because I deliberately sort of tried to ham it up and make it really camp. Now this will make sense in a second, but essentially prior to going to the sperm clinic, I'd had some acrylic nails put on. And this was a treat that like I'd kind of gifted myself because I was going through something and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to have nails again. But I'm sat there signing these forms with these big, like F off, like gold glittery nails. And I'm tapping them on the desk, deliberately trying to ham it up because I just had the slightest feeling that this experience was going to be, I don't know, like it wasn't an experience that I think as a queer person, I was well equipped for because like, you know, typically people go to the fertility clinic because, you know, well, I can't really say typically, but one of the reasons people go is to have a child, for example, with, you know, their significant other or whatever. I was opening my options and this potentially might be something that I wanted to do, but it wasn't necessarily, you know, something that was in my mind at the time. And I just thought if I obviously present myself in a really camp and queer way, I'm going to sort of bypass all of like the random sort of questions like that I didn't need to be answering. I was already sort of dealing with a lot, right? So I sat there and I'm tapping these acrylics on the desk and I'm just like, oh yeah, so like how does it work then? Go on. And she's like, oh, so, well, first of all, have you got a partner? And I was like, oh, God, I wish, what are you trying to say? Like, sort of thing, like just really over the top, tapping my nails. I'm pretty sure as well, the signature I gave is not a reflection of my actual signature. It was so obviously like flamboyant. I did like a little flick of the wrist when I did it. And she was saying, so have you thought about this procedure? And before she'd even finished talking, I'd be like, God, yeah, mad for it. Like just saying all of this, just nonsense, essentially. She takes me into the room, right? And let me just reiterate, I obviously made myself very camp, very queer. Okay, get into this room, which is just hilarious anyway, because there's an examination chair, I'm sure, I think people have spoken about this before, but it's just a very hilarious environment, and you're just locked in there, and you've only got one job to do. But before she leaves, I'll also add that she was camp as hell as well. She had a blunt bob and bangs for days, and this just added to the whole experience for me. Like that gave me life right there. But anyway, she's just about to leave, just pops her head around the door as she's leaving, and just goes, oh, by the way, as well, there's some material in that first drawer if you want to use it, give it a helping hand. And I just thought, oh my giddy aunts, right? Okay, let's have a look. And it's nice. It's a nice, very thoughtful of her. So I opened the drawer. Oh my goodness, right? I opened this drawer, I was really hesitant. I had no idea what was going to be in there. And do you know what I saw? Big, busty babes. Listen, I'm not judgy. Like, I'm not a judgmental person, but something's wrong there, innit, darling? Like that. Imagine my experience. I go in there, I'm tapping the desk. I'm like, yes, child, work, like all of this. And then big, busty babes, don't piss me off. No, not now. No.
Babes.
Honestly, I mean, I got the job done because I actually went prepared with my own material, but this, she get, it was just very, I have no idea what was going on.
You have to hand it back as well. So
oh my goodness, yes! You have to leave and go into the waiting room with this clear bag with your sperm in this bag, right? Bless her, is another shout out for Eleanor. Eleanor was there as well at the time. And she was just sitting there like, oh, so, did you get it done then? And I'm like, yeah, don't look at me. Don't. I handed over, it's very public as well. I don't know whether it's different in other clinics, but everyone was bloody there, And I just handed it over, and they were like, so we're going to go and look under a mic, and we'll let you know in a bit. So I'm sat there, and they come back and they're like, you've done really well. And I'm like, what does that mean? She's like, well, normally we freeze about 5 to 6 files, but we've got 12 healthy ones of yours. And I just thought,
big busty babes, they really
literally, the big busty babes saved my marriage. Like, that was it. Like, that's my experience. And I guess that set a precedent for the entire 2 seasons, really, of what I was about to embark on. But yeah.
Jay, wow, thank you so much. I have actually, I don't think I've cried during a Don't Laugh section before, but I did just cry a little bit. So I don't know what got me there. But also thank you so much for 2 seasons. Like, wow, 2 seasons. I love it. I love it so much. What an incredible set of stories.
So great, so funny and moving, and just like, to me, the epitome of what Afterthoughts is about. Yeah, just like ace. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your stories and just being part of series 5 of Afterthoughts.
Yay! Thank you so much for being so wonderful and accommodating, and I'm really grateful to have this experience.
So that was Jay.
Like, wow, right? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, so good at telling stories, and I just felt like I was like, there were so many times when I was like taken to these places, and we were saying afterwards to Jay about how a lot of these things we'd kind of like forgotten a bit, and then you suddenly hear this nugget, and that's the wonderful thing about stories, right? I don't want to like shout about stories too much, but it's a wonderful thing of suddenly they take you and you go, oh yeah, I forgot about the shower.
Also, can you never use the word nugget again?
Nugget? No, I'm fine with nugget.
No, it's a horrible word. Horrible.
Oh.
But yeah, you're right. And I think that is the power of stories. They connect you to people and to moments and to experiences. And yeah, they are just fantastic. And Jay just is a natural born storyteller who can just transport you with their words and their, stories. And I think they've got a gift, and it's something that they should harness. I mean, they're busy learning languages, but they could do whatever they wanted when it came to telling stories.
So Alice, tell me, what are your afterthoughts on today's Afterthoughts?
Oh, I was particularly I found the Lost Conversations section really punchy, actually. And I wrote down, I'm always scribbling away in Afterthoughts. And I wrote down two things. It's okay to set yourself free from the burden of living for the people who didn't survive. Oof. Wow, what a sentence. And you don't have to take responsibility for everyone else. All right, blooming heck, Jay. Gosh, get to the point, why don't you? I just thought they were two fantastic sentiments. And Jay said to us as well after we were recording that they hoped that people would understand that they weren't like preaching, and it was their experience and that was their perspective. And I just love that kind of self-awareness that they had, and just so wise but not preachy, which I think is a very fine line to tread. But yeah, I just those two sentences really landed with me, and I really liked what they were saying about that lost conversation. That it was one that they wished they could have had with themselves. A few years ago, and that's something that really resonates with me, and it's something that I hope we can do with Afterthoughts, because I do at times wish somebody could have had a conversation with me and saved me a lot of heartache that I have had. And I hope that that's what we're doing sometimes. We're giving people a life vest and providing them with some of the conversations we wish we'd had with ourselves. And
I think and it's that thing of the importance of hearing stories, from continuing to hear stories, right, and hearing like these different, like the fact of going, we both had Hodgkins lymphoma, Jay and myself, but and there are lots of similarities in the way that the process, but lots of different things happened, and the importance of going, there might be a young person going through that experience right now who is if I was to tell you my story, they might not connect with it in the same way they've just connected to Jay's. And I think that's really important, that thing of going, the representation really matters, right? Of going, well, and for me, to offer my afterthoughts on today's episode of Afterthoughts.
What a lovely segue.
Thank you so much.
I was going to ask you that question.
I know. But I do think, I was literally just crying with laughter at the last section and things.
Yes.
But it was that thing of we've heard lots of stories, I think, of we have had a few stories of men talking about going to the sperm bank, and I think sometimes, well, we have had a lot of heterosexual men talking about going to the sperm bank, and I was absolutely cracking up. But it also did bring up this thing of going, oh, actually, yeah, that different experience of going to that place where that is where it is set up for a heterosexual man, and what that might feel like to go into that space where it's not set up. And again, I laughed so much during that, but it also did land with me in that other way as well. And I think that's kind of the importance of going, well, actually, then we really hope that somebody might hear this story and go, oh, actually, maybe we need to think about not just pointing towards big busty babes.
I think I'm going to be laughing about big busty babes for ages, but I loved how Jay like leaned into their character and their identity when they were in that space that they knew wasn't set up for them. But I hope that hearing that story helps other people feel safer in that space if that's the right thing for them to do. But yeah, you're right. We've never had anybody tell a story about being in a fertility clinic as a queer person. And yeah, so thank you to Jay for sharing that story with us, because I think it's so important.
And we are hoping to have more brilliant stories that share the diverse experiences of having cancer at a young age in the rest of the series. So I'm not doing too bad with these links at the moment, am I, today? So it is time to say goodbye to our listeners, to thank Jay again, to thank Alice May Purkiss.
Thank you to Toby, and goodbye to our listeners, and goodbye to Ark.
The
crunching
dog
in the background.
It was munching away on the treat. What a treat it was. Thank you, Jay. Goodbye.
Bye.
If today's episode of Afterthoughts has brought up any thoughts or feelings that you'd like to speak to someone about, we really recommend grabbing a cuppa with a friend or dropping them a message. There are tons of charities out there who can help you if you've been through cancer and need a bit of extra psychological support.
Afterthoughts is supported by Trekstock and Alike. If you've been diagnosed with cancer in your 20s or your 30s, whatever type, whatever stage, Trekstock will help get you moving, get connected, and create the life you want beyond your diagnosis. Alike is a game-changing peer support platform because living with cancer can be lonely. Speaking to others who've been there, done that, and worn the unflattering hospital gown makes all the difference. Alike is powered by friendship.